This is a false one. It's a false whistle. I hate when they make false whistles. Okay, it's okay. When I lean into it, that's probably the bad thing. So I'll just make it nice and cool, nice cool level. I don't know why it's freaking out. I do have a lot of wires crossing each other in busy ways, and you know, sometimes that'll do it. Sometimes that'll do it. Hello. Hello. I see it. It's maddening because on my visual, it is not peaking at all, and it just looks calm as a serene ocean. Yes, cool. Well, you know, this is what we're going to be talking about this today. eventually, eventually, when I feel confident that the words that I'm saying are not coming across as cool. Yeah, and sorry about yesterday too. That was. I feel like this will be less of a disaster because I redid like everything for it to essentially look the same to you. But I had put a little bit of work into this, so I think this should work better. And I'm so glad that someone flagged the issue before it became like an insane issue. Okay, so let me shout over. Say Yahoo! Wee! Just be kind of happy to be here like I am. I'm so happy to be here. I've been wanting to kind of like talk to other channels and other people, and I've wanted to do it in a kind of argumentative way. And so I'm like a little bit scrappy, I guess. And that so but the problem is when I try to get scrappy with all these people that we're all so damn nice, and it all just kind of like is like, oh, okay, yeah, that actually totally makes sense. A lot of the time. Yeah, this is this is really fun. I'm super glad that David is engaging with me and that he put out like a super well reasoned, like really fun and humorous video, like just kind of in response to the general sentiments of people like me who are coming straight out of Integral, checking out his new channel at Non-Reductionism, and are not familiar with anything like he's done before, and are just like, what the heck is this? And he cleared up. So we've jumped into it a little bit. I'm going to try and assume today that like people are like coming out of nowhere. I actually don't really know how continuity works in this space. So yeah, we're a good ways into his video, and one of the things that I wanted to do right off the bat is like I'm sitting here saying like you've trained your AI. So I'm like, okay, the fun thing about this, I promise you guys, like I haven't watched this video or anything. I'm like totally unprepared. So this to me makes it like fun because it's like surprising and there's like reactions and stuff. You know what I mean? I get like my Fran Drescher voice going here. I'm getting over a sickness, so I'm gonna be a little crispy. That's for sure. Okay, so watch the master here and watch this cool. Wait, I want to do this one and then I want to delete it. All right, so I prepped it. Oh, for heaven's sakeys, hang on just a second. I go to order, move to tap. All right, so I put in to a fresh instance of GPT here. I had no idea what's going to happen, but I did type out what are the criteria that it would take to know if a meta theory, oopsies, is a healthy expression of second tier, and based on those criteria, is non-reductionism currently the only healthy, true second tier version of meta theory? So this was the question he asked, and I don't know how to use this thing. I'm just checking it out. Below is a clear non-sectarian way to think about sectars. You guys remember sectars? It was like a cool toy they were like bugs and they had cool like shiny wings. I love those things. Those are so neat. Really fun to play with in the bathtub. Non-sectarian way to think about criteria for a healthy second-tier expression of meta-theory, drawing from developmental psychology, integral theory, meta-systems theory, and contemporary meta-theorists, followed by an evaluation of whether non-reductionism is uniquely or exclusively second-tier. Don't show everyone my secrets. Criteria for a healthy second-tier meta-theory. A meta-theory can be considered healthy and genuinely second-tier, i.e. meta-integrative, not merely pluralistic or relativistic. when it demonstrates the following characteristics. Oh, dude, this is like exactly what he was saying. Metasystemic integration, not just aggregation. It must integrate multiple valid perspectives into a coherent higher. Okay, I don't want to do the thing because I'm just going to double speed me if I do that. Cool. Falling mode. It's little tiny. Failing mode. Reductionism. Oh, I could like look at it. Okay. Reductionism, collapsing everything to one explanatory level. Healthy mode. Differentiated unity. Unity through difference, not unity despite difference. Okay. Non-reductionism across domains. Second-tier cognition is characterized by non-reductionism of these types. Epistemic, ontological, methodological. This means respecting irreducible level scales, frames, and causal types. Efficient, formal, final, systemic, etc. A healthy meta theory maintains multi-causal, multi-level coherence. This is like the same thing. This is the same thing, dude. Look at this. Everyone. Detectives. Post-relativistic and not absolutist. I'm not actually this bad at reading, but I am this bad at using a trackpad. Second tier is beyond simple pluralism, yeah. Beyond absolutism, yeah. Instead, sees perspectives have conditions of validity. Truth is context sensitive, not context free. This is often called a perspectival objectivity or situated universality. Self-reflex. Okay, so we're defining these. Non-reductionism people are not perfectly objective either, but we evaluate their claims based on their quality. We don't dismiss them for being non-objective. Yay, I love your videos for info and the humor and your personality. Oh, thank you. That's what I'm here to receive. Thank you. I love us. We have fun sometimes. Okay. Self-reflexivity and reflexive capacity. A healthy second-tier meta theory must be able to see its own limits, its own conditions, its own blind spots, its own structure shapes, what it can see. This is the difference between a big theory and a truly meta-theoretical framework. 5, dynamic process-oriented thinking. Second-tier, okay, so we're naming all these conditions. That's cool. That's what we asked for. Thank you. All right, great. I don't want to read all these, honestly. I get that like we could spend this whole time diving into every word of this, and I would have fun doing that. But I think it would be more fun to just rocket through this ability to integrate paradox and polarity, ethical maturity, and non-egocentrism. This might be important for us here at home. Second tier is not just cognitive, it's also ethically expanded, care beyond tribe or ideology. Motivationally non-defensive. Motivationally non-defensive, you guys. Hey, motivationally non-defensive. Oriented toward wholeness rather than control. A meta-theory that is brilliant but used for domination, ego inflation, or ideological warfare is not healthy second tier. So, okay, is non-reductionism the only true healthy second tier meta-theory? Short answer, no. That's not what your guy said. The conditions were close. They used similar language at my infantile level. But this is his short answer for you was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. So non-reduction is a necessary component of any healthy second-tier meta-theory, but it is not sufficient or unique. Sufficient? Sufficient for what, sir? It has developed a precision mode, which does just validate my opinion. It often disagrees with me. But to your point, it calls the normal mode comfort mode. Yeah, I mean, there are times, I think that we're all kind of exploring this prompting landscape, and we're finding, those of us who use it a lot, I'm assuming a lot of us do, we're really finding that you have to tell it how much you want it to pander to you, how much you want it to consider you as a whole person or in the specific context, how much it wants to placate you, you know, and how much, like, the main thing I have to tell it every time is to challenge me, to say, like, convince me why I'm wrong. You know, this is a really fun and, for me, really original way to use it. I'm always trying to get GPT to convince me I'm wrong, and it's trying so hard not to because it's trying to give me dopamine. It wants to give me dopamine. So then when we're all done with that, I'm just like, you know what? Say something nice. That's like, you're really good at that. And it will say the nicest stuff, and it'll make me cry every time. It's such a beautiful thing. So anyways, I'm just playing around here. I'll bet if, you know, it's a roll of the dice, you know, I feel like with this. And I will say I'm on Trash GPT. I'm on, you know, whatever, try advanced for free mode. But this is not advanced. This is the crap that people like me can afford. Otherwise, I'd have so many more images, you guys. I'd be nuts with the images. I hope I'm still live. Yeah, I know. Like if I had done this on my, I was debating whether to do this on my logged in account, but I'm afraid of what it will reveal to everybody if I do that. So I'm not gonna do that one tonight. This was kind of a pointless thing I was doing anyways. So just for lols, non-reductionism is a necessary feature of second tier. As a concept, all genuinely integrated metasystemic theories will be non-reductionist because reductionism collapses complexity. Yeah, so it's a good brand name. It's good condensation of the level 7 viewpoint. But non-reductionism is not itself a complete meta theory. Dun dun dun. Because nothing is. You can't have it all. Non-reductionism is a position, not a full meta structure. A healthy second-tier meta theory must also include developmental modeling, systems integration, cross-domain translation, polarity integration. That's the stuff we've talked about before. Simply saying don't reduce things is not enough. Other frameworks that qualify as healthy second-tier, who are these people? Integral metal theory. Well, that would be cool if it was integral metal theory. That's what I want in my life. Okay, all right. It's really weird because there's the pad and you can push the pad and it does things, but then there's the buttons that are like the mouse buttons, and so I have to like use a finger on the pad and then I push the buttons with my remaining fingers, which some of them are a little bit handicapped in various ways. So it's very strange for me to have to use this futuristic device of 1998. All right. Metasystemic developmental models. Commons Stein. All right, Keegan. So people kind of in that orbit that are referencing one another. Cognitive flexibility theory. Curious about this. Critical realism. Maybe I've played around with that. No, I don't recall. I feel like I played around with that one a little. Metamodern and Lumen-informed meta theory. Yeah, we've dipped our toes in. I apologize for the phlegm. Complexity-informed meta-integrative approaches, e.g. Hansi Feinacht's Nordic metamodernism. Cool. Dialectical meta theory, Bhaskar Laska. Can we get Bhaskar and Laska out here? I don't know what dialect. It sounds cool. Meta rationality. So I'm sure. I'll bet you David knows like about all these about a concept, not the brand. Yeah. I maybe this one didn't realize that I was referring to your thing and your brand and your channel. That's most likely. It's like, why is this guy asking me, about this word non-reductionism? Like, should I just look at the word as it sits and assume that he's referring to that? Probably. This is a dope list, though. This is what happens whenever I use ChatGPT. It gives me way more than I love. All of these have multi-perspective. Yes, they all have the stuff. None of this reduces reality to a single explanatory framework. So I think what ChatGPT really wants to say is there's no such thing. Like, you can't have it all. Final answer. Criteria for healthy second-tier meta theory include blah, blah, blah. We did it. Why does it do the same thing in its shorter answer? Make it shorter than that. Is non-reductionism the only healthy form of second-tier meta theory? No, non-reductionism is necessary but not sufficient. Yeah, as a concept. Yeah, true that. Okay, non-reductionism is a core ingredient, not the whole cake. If you'd like, I can also compare non-reductionism with other meta theories. So it's saying, it's like it's pretending that it knows what non-reductionism is, but it doesn't. Anyways, that's what happens when I ask some old random good old instance of ChatGPT that question. I was my only point, like, and again, this is live. I have no idea what it's going to do. My only point is, like, yeah, I was making the argument that he's trained his AI a little, so I wanted to back that up and potentially have it totally not backed up and have it say the exact darn same old thing. So who knows? I don't know. We kill you. Okay. Got to get some intermission music. Sean S. Bjorn Hargens at Meta Integral has a course on varieties of integral, including Roy Bhaskar. That's how you can get your Bhaskar fix. That's all through the hub, yo. All right. Seriously. I'm sorry, everybody. That's disgusting. All right. Anyways, so back to last night. I'm gonna try to do this. Here we go. Whee! Of course you're not in the front. Why would you be in the front? And it's still in there. Still in my nose. Move to tap. Move him to the tap. Oh, because I'm in the wrong guy. There we go. There's the guy. All right, and then I wrote. Okay. It looks like my stream's like actually working, which is really freaking cool. Looks like that's working, and David and I are in agreement. No, it's not in here that I do this. I just get rid of this completely. Is what I do with that. I go here. Sorry for the lag in my brain hole. David and I both agree that this is too good to show you, and I don't want to dishonor that. This presentation is so dope. Check it out. I'm arguing it's like after the fact, after the point has been made, it's like, oh yeah, but by the way, like I will acknowledge that Wilbur doesn't necessarily do what you're seeing in this example at orange, green, yellow, and turquoise. Yeah, I think that's the contention, but he does do it for the remaining 4 third-tier stages. So that's the actual point, and this differs from that in that orange meme is in this case 100% pure amber meme apologetics. But I think that is not. So this is fun. That is all I'm saying about it. It's fun. I was asking ChatGPT, as someone says, how they would improve integral theory, and it actually adds a few things that are interesting. You should do the same. Yeah, wow, what a question. I don't know. Have I asked it that? I don't think that I have asked it that. What would you do? Yeah, that's a really great question. I have asked it if it thinks the things that I'm doing are cool, and so somehow it's kind of it does know my channel content somehow. I don't really, or maybe it's just from talking to me. I don't know, but I do ask for feedback on my stuff. Anyways, this was really good, and we were beyond that, and we were at about 1:10-ish, somewhere around here. And he starts talking about somebody, and I think that's about where I wanna dive in.
Like Christianity is true and a representation of what it means to be at the highest stages of development. I hope that you can relate to those feelings, because if you can, that is starting to get at why I have negative feelings about integral and about the super popular video that you did about stages of development. It is misrepresentation. It is confusion. It is harmful. It is bad. And that's why people like Don Beck and some of these other people were pissed at Wilbur. That's why he reached out to me. He felt that Wilbur perverted his maps. And he did. This is a religious perversion or corruption of these developmental maps to make it seem like a religious, traditional, fundamentalist view is literally true. You see how that's a problem? It is a problem because the worldview isn't true. And that's not just my opinion. It's a fact. Science has debunked this worldview. In the same way that evolution proves Western creationism wrong, emergentism is the other side of that same coin, and it proves Eastern idealism wrong. It is a wrong worldview. That is a fact. Now look, I don't blame you for talking about what Wilbur said, and I understand that you believe it. I understand that you're not trying to hurt anybody or misrepresent the truth. You're just honestly talking about what you think. I'm not blaming you, just to be clear. I'm just trying to get you to take the claim seriously and see why it's important. I really hope that you're not the kind of person who thinks that it doesn't matter. I really hope that you're not the kind of person who, if they did see this video, wouldn't really care or wouldn't think it was a big deal. I really hope that you're the kind of person who understands that there is a big responsibility in talking in public and spreading ideas, and that we can have big influences on people that can potentially either help a lot of people, uplift a lot of people, or confuse a lot of people
Yeah.
and lead a lot of people astray.
Okay.
And that responsibility is important. It's important to me. And it's why I take up. I find oath. That's the basis for Christian because to make claims about
I'm gonna try and
this
respond to
hand
one
and
Dave
tie
at
in
a
its to
time.
and got call me
where
We're
intuitions
about
at the
here,
end
I
during the
think.
Q&A. And then I got a video of his book talk. And as a new YouTuber at the time, I was like, well, I got to make a video about this. The video was called Integral Integrity, and it was basically talking about the problems with acting like integral theory was compatible with a belief in a personal God. Check out the clip.
Tone down irrationality. Look for spirit in ways that can be trans-rational. Care, nature, man. And he had a famous concept of the omega point, where the universe, in a sense, completes itself. There is a clear teleology in the universe, process philosophy. It's not just recognized in integral philosophy. So I've got the arguments there. I definitely argue and believe that the universe is going somewhere, and where it's going is increasingly toward the infinite. In other words, the removal of perfection from the finite realm is gradually being brought back in. As we move toward the beautiful and truly good, free will creatures discovering perfection by their own lights and gradually participating in the project of perfecting the universe, there will be a completion of evolution, and that perfection will be achieved. Humans and spiritual beings as ascenders in time will transcend to another universe age. There is a potential endpoint to evolution, just because there is perfection. Perfection can be achieved in our spiritual growth in the afterlife. We will eventually transcend time, transcend the finite universe in our spiritual ascension.
And at the heart or the depth of this realm.
Hey. Okay, yeah, that's really leggy. Sorry. Is this that sort of idealism we're referring to? So the idea that like, yo, evolution's gonna end in perfection, in this absolute thing, I mean, this would be kind of, I think what we're saying here is this is sort of somebody taking that idea and not leaving it open-ended and saying that there's like other, that there's further evolution possible. All right, I want to try and understand this. I think I haven't finished like watching this segment here.
Is the spiritual experience of the love of the Creator for each creature. The love of God is the thrilling experience of being known and cared for as an individual by the source of the universe, is a thrilling confirmation of the faith of those who have a personal relationship with God, this creative being which has will and love.
This creator God sees me, Jeff, and loves me, Jeff.
That's what the experience of the love of God confirms.
Any religion or spirituality in the future will be focused increasingly on the direct experience of spirit. So what is the spiritual experience? The presence of the infinite. Christianity recognizes God as infinite, but of course different spiritual traditions take this idea of spiritual infinity in different directions. So like Buddhism recognizes non-duality as infinite in its own way. Christianity recognizes God as infinite. Alfred North Whitehead or Sri Aurobindo in the 20th century were big proponents of the central significance of these values, these concepts on the spiritual path. Their partialities point to another major form of spiritual experience, of ultimate reality, that doesn't fit very well within a non-dual teaching. This idea of the love of God, especially when understood in the light of what we learn from non-duality, points to its own attractor basis of spiritual experience with its own specific practices. If you take up meditation and you do it with rigor for years, it's likely that you may have a samadhi experience. And likewise, if you take up the practices of theistic spirituality, faith, prayer, practicing the presence of God, there's a similar kind of profound spiritual experience which has been described by saints and sages down through the ages, and that's being personally known and cared for by the source of the universe. If there's only one thing, if there's no separation, then it's hard to ground philosophically this idea of love. But if we allow for a panentheistic conception of creator and creature, then the idea of the love of God can be reclaimed in a way that doesn't.
Excuse me, sir, I got a question. I would definitely I would have something to say here in this context. I would definitely be like, yo, this is all totally possible without anything involving like the Bible or anything, right? Like, are you on that page, or do you think it has to be specifically the Bible stuff to get there? Like, I would probe this quite a bit. But I do think that ideas like this are of a sort of universal resonance sort of idea. Like, if you want to call what Wilbur would call spirit God, and that's really important to you, you might assess, like, why is that so important to me? And this would be your sort of level 5 inquiry. I mean, I think we're on the same page about that. Like, I think that if we're in the integral community looking at a guy like this, it's like looking to anybody who's engaged in any degree of apologetics. You just kind of snap back with level 5. It's always level 5, right? And however, we are multicultural pluralists. We have the green meme operating system running within us, and we allow like different modalities of understanding spirit, because certainly the one that I personally do is not a one that anyone else personally does. It's just my own jam that I do that derives a lot of elements from other things. And so my whole modality for understanding all of it is in my own little twin language that I'm like somewhat sharing with the world, but not really. I mean, it's I try to teach a sort of individualizing path, so it's not really for compatibility purposes. And nevertheless, if I describe it in my terms, in the terms that are my language and familiar with me, it'll come across as this kind of weird thing that has this amazing deep core resonance with the integral theories that exist, and with medieval ideas of a great chain of being, and whatever the heck this guy's on about, that's like really kind of bringing it into the love of God concept. The I and now thing is very important to his quadrant view, it would seem. And it seems to have probably spent a lot of time in the Christian tradition looking very carefully at ideas that exist within that meta. I see the problem, Amber struggles, is that it attributes everything good to God and everything bad to the devil, where no, it's the same, but their minds can't seem to process the non-duality. I often catch myself doing this too. The devil. You guys have a devil? Any of you guys have like a nemesis, a devil? You got an opposer? A Satan? And this guy wrote integral consciousness. Yeah, so this guy is like
Doesn't cause us to regress. There's an interdependent polarity in these two major attractor bases of spiritual experience. And this can be understood as non-dual oneness and the love of God. These two different kinds of spirituality are like two legs of our progress. The tension energy, the existential challenge that one offers to the other, is actually the energy that we need for transcendence itself.
Non-dual ultimate reality is a very important part of ultimate reality. But there's another deep experience of ultimate reality in the love of God.
Humanity has developed both. In Buddhism, without a creator God.
Sure.
And in the West, it was built all around a creator God. That itself, to me, as a citizen of the world, argues that there's got to be some truth to both.
I notice as I'm hearing you talk that there's a little thrill sensation arising in my body and in my...
That whole thing that we just saw, that was cheesy as hell. That's highly sus, right? I mean, the next stage is believing. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like obviously, right?
psyche, because to see this values gravity towards goodness, truth, and beauty just built into the system, and to see how it's been unfolding not only in the culture at large, but also in my own life and in history and in the whole history of the cosmos, it's starting to feel like there's not only an intelligence behind it, but also a love, or there's also a loving intelligence or a personality at work here. And I wonder how this view can actually...
There's a personality here, you're putting that in, right? There's a personality and it's anthropocentric projection. There is I don't know, I think that there's that manifestation has a sort of personality to it. It's really hard to pin down though, right? I mean, to one thing or to dualities of things or seasons of things, what is the one taste? What's common? What's the general personality or character of all of existence? Interesting question, right? Framed weird, right? Okay.
Provide the basis of a deep spiritual life and practice that is post...
You can't just get on Christians for doing this love word thing, this thing with the word love. It's a very highly suspicious word, love.
Postmodern is post-mythic, where the scientific truth of evolution can be the basis for an authentic spiritual path.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for bringing that up. So we're like the portal that brings the infinite through into the finite. Human consciousness, because of its recognition of these elements.
Please don't call people portals. I'm not ready for this. This is triggering
the
me.
basis for an authentic spiritual path.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for bringing that up. So we're like the portal that brings the infinite through into the finite. Human consciousness, because of its recognition of these elements of infinity, the beauty, the true, and the good, as that light shines into the phenomenal world, the finite world, we see it as these values. And as our consciousness evolves, as the opening widens, we are able to see presence of the infinite with increasing depth and clarity. And this is the new truth of evolutionary spirituality that's revealed by our understanding of evolution itself.
Wow.
So
Cool.
Yeah.
There's a marriage of rationality, not the kind of science that's being practiced commonly by scientistic fundamentalists, certainly, but a rational clarity and a spiritually inspired understanding that is coming together in a synthesis. We could call it non-dual. We could call it panentheist. That is, everything is God. There is only God. And yet God is more than anything. So there really is another kind of mysticism we're awakening to that is the most personal. And what I'm appreciating in my work right now, in which I'm expanding integral life practice into what I'm calling integral soul work, is a resonance with what I'm feeling in the Urantia book around this soul dimension. This wonderful quality of the Urantia book that it is both non-dual and that it is entirely theistic at the same time. There's a spiritual fragrance in that and an inspired heart in that I
dual, and it is entirely theistic at the same time. Yeah, like, geez, guy. I mean, if you're gonna say it's entirely integral and it's entirely theistic, you're gonna have to really, like, I don't know what happened before this moment. I probably should have paid better attention, but I bet you the part where he's trying to unload this word theism in some new way, you know. Yeah, this is quite into apologetics here. Yeah.
I hope will bring something to the integral.
But I mean, I think that the way that these guys, these types, these these profiles of people, the way that this goes down is you're like, but I really want to make an authentic connection to an authentic spirituality to the existing Christian population. Highly suspicious. I mean, but heck, the money incentive's there. So I think that what we're kind of alluding to here is a bit of like, how do we like watch guard this sort of thing? Like what do we have to put in place culturally or structurally to kind of like give the dog its due, or because we're saying like, okay, this guy's like making some money here. This guy's drawing crowds. Like, is that a bad thing? Is it a good thing? This is our question out here, and it looks like we have I hope that we have a diversity of opinions about that. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But then again, you know, people come and comment on my channel who are like hardcore Christians, and they're like, oh, this is like pure Satan you're doing. I'm like, well, it's not freaking pure Satan. I gave your point there for a second. All right, anyways, this guy Terry co-wrote Integral Life Practice. Yeah, okay, so he's one of the guys who was involved in writing that, which I did read and I did a review of. It was a cutie pie. I felt like at the point where I read that book, I already basically pretty much totally understood what it was and was able to do it without the book's help. So it was kind of a I don't know how much I said that in the video. It was really fun to read and it was a cool read, but it was more just like I felt more confident, like, okay, if I were to design my life around integral theory, I would do pretty much exactly what this is suggesting. But I don't know that would be true of others, especially if it was like the only book of this kind that you read. True that. Yeah, there's a center of gravity thing, but there's also a fixation thing that Wilbur talks about, at least for one. That you can have like lines that just can't really get beyond. There's like a fundamental lower leveliness about them that for whatever reason, you know, you can't seem to get beyond, and who knows how you could like train or therapy out of that, but it seems to be a thing. And obviously there's a lot of people that just will never, they have this really strong inbuilt, you know, hardwired thing that if you don't believe in God, you're like so toast, you know, that gets so drilled into people. And I mean, what are you going to do if that's your psychology, if that's like how you've been trained from birth, and the whole world you've known has the good guy has been the God believer? Like what can you do with that psychology? You have to kind of make lemonade, turn it into something beautiful. I should assume. I don't know about it. I mean, obviously from my perspective as a heathen, I would be like, well, get out of there. You know, don't let people tell you what to be and what to do. Those are like toxic relationships. But what do I know? I'm a loner. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways.
World community too.
I'm hoping that these two different communities can get a greater interaction and rapport, and I'm sure it will happen.
Integral is being conflated with Urantia here. And maybe you don't know what Urantia is, but it's basically some kind of...
This is old school David is like he's like it looks like we're gonna go and find like a unique mushroom out in the woods. This is fun. He's like a yoga guy back then. So this is like, I think this is the old David we're looking at here.
Of way out there Christian cult that combines reincarnation and space aliens and Jesus. And the text of the Urantia comes to us through channels, through mediums. Is this what you want associated with Integral? Is this skillful outreach and integration? I don't think so. So yeah, it's been about 10 years since this video came out. And the version I have online is like 480p. It's not very good. And I wasn't very good at editing back then. So who knows? Maybe I'll do like a 10-year...
Is there like a UFO? I should actually... Okay, I'm going to actually go back and watch that for real. Is there like a UFO cult thing going on?
Reincarnation and space aliens and Jesus. And the text of the Urantia comes to us through channels, through mediums. Is this what you want associated with Integral? Is this skillful outreach and integration? I don't think so. So yeah, it's been about 10 years since this video came out. And the version I have online is like 480p. It's not very good. And I wasn't very good at editing back then. So who knows? Maybe I'll do like a 10-year anniversary remaster edition of the video or something like that, because it's pretty good, even though it's pretty long. The version I have.
One thing I'm like, I guess one thing that would sort out a lot for me, like David, would you say that in general your former videos prior to rebrand you're very much still in alignment with them, even though you're just deciding to kind of reboot your brand and the style of presenting? Or are you saying that like because you were more aligned with Integral and kind of more apologetic toward Integral, you no longer kind of support the old content that you made? That would help me to kind of understand this this issue with like you having a former brand identity in this community. Thus far, I'm really just responding to the small, currently like kind of small, it's like growing non-reductionism brand. Like that's all I'm like. And the reason I'm doing this is because someone who was interested in us, probably from Home Math or whatever, you know, someone who was interested pointed me to your video and was like, yo, you know, what do you think about this? That's why I looked at your stuff. Not that I don't like, I don't know. I don't really like watch a lot of like other YouTube integral theory tutorials, except when I was first starting out, I was kind of curious what was out there, but I try to avoid doing things like that because I don't, if anything, I would want to contact these people and do collabs with them instead and learn about them through dialogue. Because for one thing, it's just it becomes the thing that I do in my spare time, basically, if that's what I'm doing. And yeah, sure. I think that both of you and I probably had a phase where like listening to integral audio stuff was like how we spent like at the gym or walking or whatever. Like you spent a lot of time digesting this material, especially if you're reading like other people's books and you're plugged into the live events and community events. Like it becomes quite a lot to keep up with for being so little, you know, in terms of its cultural impact and stuff. That's kind of my deal with it. Like I'm just like a consumer here. I'm like, I really don't have time for a lot of things, not because I'm so cool or anything, but because I'm so lame that I like have to, like I have very little resources to allocate to this. So I keep it down to like pretty precious things, which like for me are human interaction and the thrill of doing things that I'm not really entirely comfortable with and putting out there, you know, my emotional truth, my intellectual truth, kind of my digs into this world. It's really, really fun for me, and I'm just loving the pants off of it. I can't believe you can do it for free in this world currently. Mostly still aligned. Yeah, so his old material, he's mostly still aligned. There might be a thing or two. Even back when I was trying to reform from within, I'm distancing myself from the integral brand, not so much my old ideas. Right. And back then it was a source of tension. So probably what I'm doing is like a bad idea in terms of like disconnecting from this. So But I think that this can lead to interest from integral people, like assuming that anyone cares, like about what I'm doing, could lead to interest from us, our side to your side, and this is the sort of, I feel like this is the sort of debate you want, is to kind of talk to a more of like an integral purist. But I'm a fun special case of an integral purist, like apparently, when you look at others. So yes, being integral would include UFOs and UAP. So what oh heck, like, at least in the sense of like what the information that exists currently is, how it works, why it works, the psyops side of things. That's at the very least, that would need to be said as like whistleblowers are coming out with like, hey, I saw a weird thing that does things that we don't know, and then somebody took me into an office and beat me, sorry. And from a psychological perspective, I've always thought that this is a legitimate thing that should be taken seriously. In many ways, culturally, socially, it is shown that like there is a deliberate intelligence platform of ridiculing this, that like that trickles down, ridiculing this. But there's a lot to ridicule in all this stuff. So this is a very like balance point thing. Integral should say something about UFOs. I don't think there where the flying saucer was beaming Christ consciousness into the shepherd or whatever, that's not the kind of thing. I don't want to do the full on like UFO cult deal, but as an integral thinker, curious about how they arrive at these conclusions, other than just kind of being hallucinating narcissist. It would be like the most common way that you come to the conclusion that UFOs are telling you to start, that the end is coming, and that we must all like do certain things that would please me. Anyways, okay, he doesn't like that I'm reading them. Oh, he doesn't like that I'm reading them. He's make them go away. Sorry.
Have is better. I believe it's at least 720p, and maybe I could upscale it. But anyways, when Steve McIntosh first heard I put out this video, he was like, just call me, we'll talk about it. You don't got to put out this video. And he's like, I'm a lawyer. You don't have permission to use any of my recorded videos on my YouTube, and YouTube won't let you. So don't even try it. Apparently, even though he was a lawyer, he didn't really know how free use worked. I did end up putting a disclaimer at the front of the video, though, just to be like, hey, this is free use. You can't take it down. And then in the comments, he's basically telling me, you can't do a review based on a 1-hour talk I did. You have to do a written book review. Again, this guy is like living in the past. And then he also challenged me to a debate, which I accepted, but he never actually got back to me about actually setting up a debate. Anyways, the point is, these guys actually are friends with Ken Wilber. They've been on Integral Life. He's endorsed their work. This guy, Jeff Salzman, ran the biggest Integral podcast for years. Terry Patton's one of Ken Wilber's close friends, and he's in here with this Urantra cult, trying to act like Integral and Urantra are compatible. So actually now I don't think this is really a problem with Integral integrity. I think it's actually a problem with Integral itself. This is a feature, not a bug. Part of Integral itself,
the brand, the brand
itself is this type of bad integration that allows people with dogmatic worldviews to think that they're at the highest stages of development when they're not. Another thing that,
and so I think this is like a solid point that I probably I would probably put this forth as well. Like Ken Wilber wants to associate with people who can do an influence thing, like are capable of being like an influential person, that are super passionate in integral theory and want to bring it into the thing that they're doing. And I think that, yeah, like when people get really involved with him and they start coming out like kind of fringe from Integral with things that Wilber would kind of probably disagree with, at least in spirit a lot of the time, you don't really see that. I think he's just kind of trying to bring those people together, get those voices out there. I bet you that, and so this is kind of, this is the question, like, what about things that make it more sciencey? Is he closed off to those? This is a good place to go to with it. Yeah, and as far as those things, I'm not really in defending the integral culture or brand that their social organizations and stuff. I'm not really just in that position. I could kind of go, yeah, I kind of agree with it if, to whatever extent. I'm only hearing one side of this, and I have my own like very partial view of the situation. But yeah, this is one side of it. I think it's a totally valid side. I think
that has been brought up and talked about is what is a pre-trans fallacy and what is not. One of the major problems in the integral community is they use the word transrational and they don't know what it means.
And just because it's kind of flagging in my mind, like, so, is it then, you got this guy, he's writing books about how your theory proves his thesis, whatever, however this looks in real life. And now you're in the position of, do I need to make a public statement disavowing this? Do I need to critique this publicly? Do I need to engage with people who are critiquing it publicly? What is Ken Wilber's role, or whatever? What is that culture's role in moderating, mediating, causing those debates to happen, causing that discussion to happen, right? These are questions. These are valid questions. They are not being answered, it would seem, right?
They use it incorrectly. And Adam uses it incorrectly too. He basically says that transrational means transpersonal. Transrational, transpersonal, same thing. That is not true.
The transrational applies to consciousness itself, or the subtle. This thing that they're talking about in transcendental states of consciousness and meditation and enlightenment has something non-linguistic, non-rational, trans-rational. That's transcendental enlightenment, like stated in simple English, which doesn't convey it at all. But that's why it's transrational. The trans dimension, it's not a thing that has mass or takes up space. It's not really of that nature. It's phenomenological. It has to do with your comprehension of metaphysics in the present moment at any given time, in correlation with, co-emerging with brain states.
No, that is not what transrational means. So I think I actually have the best video.
I mean, I think that what to address like you're pointing out here, like I would say that there is a transrational has a much shallower midpoint to its spread. Transpersonal is much wider, where you would define something as transpersonal would be much wider. They'd be like, might have about the same center, but yeah, so transrational, in if I'm a person who has a transpersonal view that I think that's a thing, then of course the transpersonal view would occupy like the same level as the transrational view. Those would exist at the same level, being different things, but we're doing apples and oranges. They're both fruits. They're both of a similar size. They're both good to eat.
Video there is on the pre-trans fallacy, and it talks about how the pre-trans fallacy works across multiple different lines: pre and trans rational, pre and trans conventional, pre and trans personal, pre and trans traditional, and pre and transgender. Not like transition.
And they work like at multiple points in the same line. Like every level is a pre-trans fallacy. Maybe that
gender,
sounds right.
But like being developed beyond simple gender binaries. I also have another video on the integral stage talking about pre-trans distinctions with Layman and Bruce. I'm going to put all of these videos in a playlist in the description, so you can just go through and check out all the relevant videos that I bring up in this video. I think that will be helpful. But my point is, there is a consistent logic about pre and trans distinctions that works across all of these lines. And what you're saying is not compatible.
Yeah, that's true. So he's saying that because they're different lines, they are apples and oranges. They can run independent of one another. So the transpersonal space should not be considered like anharmonic or the same thing as the transrational space. I'm saying they're at the same altitude, but this is a different, the integral, as I understand, non-reductionism's actual theoretical base is different from integral, and one of the ways it's different is that it's not really seen this way. It's this particular fact is not really seen that way. As I understand, spiral dynamics is a model of the values line. I don't know how much you consider that true. The altitudes that I have a version of behind you there are considered a universal measuring stick of every line could go through these levels. I don't think that your theory embraces that. And maybe this, so like to me, if I'm diving into your this brand videos to understand your this brand perspective, that's like a new topic for me. I'm actually, I don't know why it was so problematic to engage with the brand as it exists now and what exists now. I like totally am getting the net, like wait for me to put out videos on this topic, and then I'll clear up, the misunderstanding that anyone who is familiar with integral theory and is checking out non-reductionism for the first time will have. So yeah, okay, we'll be patient, um, but yeah, these are the misunderstandings that I'm just getting from the content which exists. Without, yeah, and so okay, with reference to the other content, that's kind of a new topic for me. I know that's not the way that we all like to do things, but that's just kind of how the cookie's crumbling. Anyways,
with this pre and trans distinction logic. Trans-rational doesn't mean transpersonal, doesn't mean post-conventional. Your logic doesn't work in a consistent way. There's no trans dimension. And we're not talking about subtle reality. The consistent logic around pre-trans distinctions and pre-trans fallacies and pre-trans confusions is that people often confuse things that are non-rational, non-personal, non-conventional, non-traditional, non-gendered. Some of them might be pre and some of them might be trans. And there's two types of mistakes in relationship to these things that are non. The first fallacy is when people reduce anything that's non as if it's all pre. And then the second fallacy is when people lift up things that are pre as if they are trans when they're not. So basically, there's a developmental before or pre and a developmental trans. So we're not talking about states. We're talking about development as it relates to particular lines. People can get into these different states at any stage of development. There are plenty of pre-rational traditional religious believers who are Buddhist who get into these states all the time. It doesn't make them trans-rational. Has nothing to do with their cognitive development. States are horizontal.
Okay, that's interesting. Entering states, they aren't entering a trans-rational state. I find that disagreeable, but it's something I need to consider for sure. Like, is nirvikalpa samadhi? I get nervous about saying that word, nirvikalpa samadhi. Nirvikalpa samadhi. Is that rational? Is that pre-rational? Is that trans-rational? Or I think the answer is it has nothing to do whatsoever with rational. I think that's the answer.
Stages are vertical. Being in the state doesn't get them to a higher stage. You're confusing something like non-mental states with trans-rational interpretation.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the answer. Yeah, non-mental is not trans-rational.
They're very different things. This is a linguistic confusion, and it is, like I said, very.
I would say this comes down to the fact that we aren't even using these words standard in the first place. We're using them in this very integral meta theory sort of way also.
Common in the integral community. I totally get why people confuse the two things because they think, oh, if I turn off the talking voice in my mind, that feels like I'm transcending something, like I'm getting above it or getting beyond it. But mental content, whatever you want to call it, the talking voice in your head, the pictures that come up, if you can quiet all of that mental stuff, if you're looking at your blank mind, it's still mental. But mental noise is not the same thing as rational. When we talk about trans-rational or post-formal, we're talking about interpretations from stages of development beyond the rational.
I mean, wouldn't we say, in general, that transcendental state practice increases intuition? And would we not then say that type of intuition is trans-rational, even if it's only occurring at a level 4 altitude or a level 4 across multiple lines? If that person's regularly going into states of consciousness, I should assume that they would have a greater I mean, it's hard for, I guess that I would be really interested to see like those lower points in the Wilber-Combs lattice to have like cross the lattice reports of like would I mean, I guess just an index of what intuition is, you know, develop some sort of index to describe maybe like a Jungian conception of like synchronicity, intuition, a sense of being abnormally lucky in spirit in some way. And I don't know to what extent non-reductionism considers those aspects of an integral theory or level 4 mumbo jumbo. I do not know. As oh my gosh, so much more happened. Yes. You can, and people do wake up at lower stages. It's about those experiences are rationalized. For example, an Amber experiencing the causal void could interpret it as some kind of purgatory. Yeah, so interpreting but I mean, they're accessing the causal void, and we are saying that what is occurring here is not going to a transpersonal space, a transrational space, is not showing, you know, I mean, this is like it's a different way of thinking about it. Different way.
Stage, transrational interpretations. There are no such thing as transrational states, and we're not talking about anything subtle. We're talking about interpretations. In fact, a person could interpret the same state at different times in their life and have different interpretations. They might first have a pre-rational interpretation of that state, and then thinking back on it from a rational stage, they might have a rational interpretation of that state experience, and then
isn't like the distinction between subtle and gross like wait, what in the hell?
From a rational stage, they might have a rational interpretation of that state.
Yeah, aren't like gross and subtle just like interpretations? I think that was the word I was fishing for there. Interpretations, like
experience.
So I think yeah, because you don't use those as levels, and so they're states. So I think that I might be using like an older idea of the state concept, wherein like you can have state experiences since the levels occur in flowing waves. A state could just be like where you're up one level, you're down one level as you're flexing and flowing at particular lines. Like those could be called a state experience too. So I don't know if those are like in the same category or they have similar mechanics in non-reductionistic thinking.
And then later in life, they might have a transrational interpretation of that same experience. All the same experience, different interpretations. States are not pre or trans. States are horizontal. Stages are vertical. That's what's happening in the Wilber-Combs matrix. You can get into a state at any stage, but you'll always interpret any state experience, any experience at all, from that stage, because we only have our mental tools to be able to interpret. So there are pre-rational interpretations, rational interpretations, and transrational interpretations. This isn't even just my opinion. It's integral theory. Ken Wilber would disagree with you. The whole logic behind a pre-trans fallacy is that it's a
So, I mean, are you saying that Ken Wilber doesn't ever build his model with levels 9, 10, 11, and 12 and describe them similarly to how I'm describing them here? I feel like it hasn't been a consistent thing. It's been a thing that he's done in a few of his books, particularly the more recent ones. These are considered in his current model. I feel like this is a thing that you vehemently reject, but they are considered levels just like the other levels, a level version of each of these states. So, I mean, yeah, like what you're saying in these ways, as though it's like an arguing point, is you're just saying like, yeah, I don't think that's true. you're saying the same thing as integral theory with there's like a Wilbur-Combs lattice that means at any level that you're at, you can have any of these 4 categories of state experience, and you will interpret it, communicate it, express it, and experience it through the lens of your various lines at whatever levels that they're at. Great. You know, there's no disagreement there. But when you get up to the hypothetical level 9 of any model, whether it exists or not, the Wilbur thing is that he's saying, yeah, like beyond there at level 8, you have this option to go into a level of cultural, social, all 4 quadrant level, full stage of consciousness for the planet that would be like a continuous access of what we're calling the psychic state, which is, it's not really a state, it's sort of a category of experience. It's a category of transcendent state experience, and it's sort of a boundary category. So it's a very like fuzzy category, the psychic. And I believe that, yeah, in several places he's made it sound as, well, because if there is paranormal or occult stuff going on, this is where that would kind of belong. If it's like beyond meta science or anything supernatural, that would kind of go here in this bucket. And I'm not alone necessarily in humanity or the integral community with ideas. You probably agree with this too, that there's just a lot of stuff we really don't see or understand yet about reality, about nature. Now, I'm not saying, I'm highly suspicious of anyone who's talking about like UFOs, ghosts, psychic powers, paranormal abilities. I'm highly suspicious of that. But I think that there's a place for the unknown and the mysterious and things that would go beyond our comprehension of consciousness. And I think that could be placed in like a higher category. Like, sure, all right, like what if some other planet at some point in time evolved beyond our level of consciousness, and somehow, some way, in ways that we don't see or understand, is doing crap that influences us and the information around us in some way. These are points that serious people make. These are serious points. They're not very scientific at all, because there's not scientific. There's work done. There's not a whole lot of like ability for science to prove weird ideas of what might be. But our reality is very, very deeply unknown. That's kind of an important thing to keep in mind as people keep reporting, hey, I got abducted by aliens. It was like in this weird dream, and there were little goblins around my bed, and they like put weird instruments in me, and then I went to like a doctor, and they actually removed like a subdermal implant. Like, okay, that's a data point. We can learn about psychology, or we can learn about nature here. There's something to gain from this sort of discussion. And again, you know, this is an integral theory. There's an integral theory of reality. This is a container that contains everything. Thanks for being here, Namal. We'll see you next time. Yeah, I know I should go to bed, but I won't. So I'm bad. Yep.
Developmental distinction. And if you're familiar with the Wilbur-Combs matrix, you would know that states are free and stages are earned, and that you can get into a state at any stage of development. The only thing that's different is how you interpret the state. Let's go to Ken Wilber, so that way you can see.
There's another dynamic that he always discusses in this context, which is the idea of state structures. That like, there's a difference between just having a state at any time. And what I believe he actually says is the state itself is free, the state structure is earned, because he calls those stages as well. And he definitely says that in reference to, you know, vertical levels. But yeah, so the state structure is like, not only have I ever had a subtle state, I could do it right now. I am doing it right now. I do it every day. It's part of me. I can teach it to anyone. You know, that's kind of what I would see as like a stable state structure. Don't know. Yeah, it's a container. Territory states. Some can build their vehicle to navigate land, water, and air, but whether a person can be in a specific territory all the time, this depends on the vehicle.
him say it himself.
States are free, stages are earned. There's several things that meditation doesn't do. It won't provide you with the context of wisdom, and that's why you have to have a cognitive interpretation that goes along with meditative states. You actually have to come out and have a philosophy that helps interpret your experience.
I don't care what stage anybody's at, all 4 states are available at all 6 stages. As a person unfolds through these stages, they're still going to have access to the states, but they're going to interpret them at the stage they're at.
If you see that interior light, you're going to interpret it according to the stage that you're at. You can't help it. When you're in it, you're in it. But as soon as you come out of it, if you're at the magic stage, it's going to be magical. If you're myth, you're going to interpret it ethnocentric. If you see that light and you're rational and scientist, you might come out of it and you might try to interpret it away. You can have very profound religious experiences, but interpret them ethnocentrically. You can have very profound spiritual experiences, interpret them egocentrically.
You can be at the rational level of development, like Bertrand Russell was, for example, and he had experience of nature mysticism, but he interpreted it, of course, in rational terms. That's almost all you can do. If you have a peak experience, as I was saying, let's say you're at the mythic stage or wave of development, and you have an experience of a subtle being of light. It's culturally molded. If you're in China or in Southeast Asia and you have an experience of light, it might very well have 10,000 arms. It might very well be Avalokiteshvara. You're never going to find a Southern Baptist seeing 10,000 arms, but it's just very, very rare. The ethnocentric part, though, is nobody can be saved unless they believe my God, or unless they believe my Jesus, or my Jehovah, or my Allah, or my whatever it is. It's very, very common at the ethnocentric level.
And just to show you a little bit more, there used to be this course called Core Integral that you could buy, and it was Flash, so it's not really available anymore. But they were teaching the core concepts of integral theory. Let's hear what it has to say about the Wilbur-Combs matrix.
What is
Your
this?
vertical
course 1 and 2 bundle, like, okay.
The ethnocentric level.
And just to show you a little bit more, there used to be this course called Core Integral that you could...
There used to be this course. Like, is this like a knockoff? Like, is this from Integral Institute? Like, what e-learning courses? It's an e-learning course. Like, is this like if I made a course?
Buy, and it was Flash, so it's not really available anymore. But they were teaching the core concepts of integral theory. Let's hear what it has to say about the Wilbur-Combs matrix.
Your vertical or structural center of gravity determines your interpretation of every peak experience. This interplay of states and stages is best encapsulated in a diagram such as this, called the Wilbur-Combs lattice. When we take the structural interpretations into consideration, the 4 peak experiences transform into a vast territory of distinctly interpreted peak experiences. Keep in mind that structures are not just responsible for the interpretation of peak experiences. As a matter of fact, they interpret all state experiences from the mundane to the sacred. This is simply because the level of complexity that an individual has developed to determines their depth of understanding of whatever it is that they encounter. Structures also determine the depth and type of content available to an individual. Consider someone with a much lower center of gravity, say at red. Do you think that they too could have a non-dual peak experience? The answer is a resounding yes. Their very real peak experience was filtered through an interpretive self-sense that had developed to red. We must admit that their peak experience was authentic, real, and valid.
David, are you opposed to the altitudes concept, like the concept of a meta levels that are measured, like basically that there's a verticality that applies to all lines, I guess? I think would be the altitudes concept.
Valid, because peak experiences are possible regardless of developmental level. We can value or rank based on this individual's specific interpretation as less developmentally complex. States are the containers, and structures determine content and interpretation.
So again, states are not pre or trans. There are no trans-rational states. There are only trans-rational interpretations of states. And even talking about the states as trans is a pre-rational interpretation of the state.
I guess I've never had what I would consider a state experience that didn't seem transrational to me, and that's probably because, well, I don't know, it seems more transrational. Say, I'm assuming that states that I've had were at level 6, probably.
We're not talking about a trans-rational interpretation of states. You're talking about the literal, dogmatic, traditional, pre-rational interpretation of what these states mean, rooted inside of the traditional, religious, Eastern worldview, the way that you...
Yeah. It's going through the layer of translation that the ancient descriptions of states, which are pretty pretty popular, pretty common, part of how our culture understands what states are, older stuff, come from those older cultures. Perhaps the individuals themselves had many lines at those older levels while they were describing those states. So, yeah.
You understand what's happening in these states is exactly the
But you're saying, like we're all saying, everyone's saying, level 3 can have the non-dual experience. So, wouldn't, like, if level 7 can have that experience and level 3 can have that, can't level 7 use level 3's data, like level 3's description, to then put themselves into, okay, I understand a lot of this is like level 3 language, but what they're describing is a state that is the same state that I can access at my level. Like, I think this is all integral.
Pre-rational interpretation of the states. People at a rational stage will talk about how it calms me down, it helps me to be centered, it relieves my stress, all this kind of stuff.
I don't think that people who describe it that way are having like subtle and causal states. I'm open to feedback on that, but I don't. Whenever I've meditated a lot and felt like relaxed and calm and like cool things, good vibes, a little happier, sure. And then I've had states of consciousness that I would like describe, like, whoa, I'm having a religious experience. And when I wouldn't describe that as like, oh, it was peaceful, it was relaxing, I was chill. I don't think that's my level. I think it's like states of consciousness, until you're like acclimatized to transcendent states of consciousness, they're pretty intense. I believe that is like part of it in most cases. Like, they're pretty shocking and intense. They overturn things. It's not just like peaceful, relaxing. I don't think that those. I think that level 5 is like often very ill-suited to states of consciousness, because they have a predilection to not believe in them, and they have a very pragmatic mindset and a very egoic mindset, right? That's like just kind of counter to the general vibe of accessing states of consciousness, I believe.
Transrational interpretation will be talking about
and so can a person at level 5 like access like non-dual, right? Yeah. Causal. Yeah. They can. I mean, obviously, especially if you're motivated by level 5, like, yeah, you're going to try as hard as you can to do that, and maybe you'll get it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We're all saying the same thing here.
Deconstruction of a concept of a self, how you can develop a meta perspective.
It is counterintuitive to illustrate states in a horizontal axis. It would be more intuitive to have a levels altitude as well as a state altitude. Yeah, I like to think of states as like depth going down, like deeper, and levels is going up. The point being that like, I think that the point we're all making here is that like, they're not the same darn thing. That the states are not the same darn thing as levels. They have a relationship to one another. They happen. All states occur at all levels. No, like, we're all kind of on board with that. That was the thing that kind of, I think, that Ken Wilber like learned throughout his like making this theory. I don't think he started out with that.
That helps you to break your patterns and deconstruct the myth of the self. So this is transrational interpretation that can.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm just saying in broad numbers, right, across populations, would there not be like differences in frequencies of transcendental state experiences at particular levels, or do you think it's just like a type thing, or how does that work? Right. Yeah. Right. And I guess, yeah, like, so what is the practical reason for accessing nirvikalpa samadhi, for like greater peace, greater resolve, greater equanimity? Is that a sufficient motive? Because I feel like I'm motivated by mortality and the noble truths, and I think that that's like why in that tradition it's described it like in those terms. I think that it really is like a life and death situation from a lot of people's perspective, particularly from the perspective, in my opinion, of most people who are driven to go like all the way into that and adopt all of the states as like legitimate state structures to really make it like who they are and what they are. But yeah, I'm still curious about kind of the way non-reductionism deals with the
also lead to transpersonal outcomes. But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about literal interpretations rooted inside of literal beliefs in the Eastern worldview. Like you're really getting in touch with the ground of being, and that consciousness is the ground of being, and that you found your true self, all this kind of stuff.
That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth, and it's that sense of I amness. The journey of enlightenment, if you want to put it in a simplified form, is the journey that moves you from your empirical self, anything that you can see or know about yourself, any object, to pure awareness, pure self, your true self, the self that cannot be made an object, but is the space in which all of this is arising. That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing.
Joseph Campbell, probably the recent errors.
It's a literal koan, though. So this is a very dialectic thing. It's stupid. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like the way he's saying it is like suspicious, highly suspicious. But when you say it's a literal koan, that has a like koan has a meaning that it's like the literality of it is not is not concrete. Like to be literally a koan is not the same thing as the koan to be literally true. You keep talking like only your interpretations of what states are legitimate before you even demonstrated that they're legitimate. The claim is that they're before I've even demonstrated that they're legitimate, the claim is that they are pre-rational. Only your interpretation. I mean like this is actually my problem is that I don't know how different people talk about states, like what I should consider real or not, because I feel like there are different ways of describing the experience of having states, and I don't personally find it easy to tell the difference in another person. It's a probabilities thing. It's like a probably kind of deal. And I feel like I talk as though my state interpretations are highly suspicious. I hope that gets across to everybody. I'm just trying to tell people what it's like in my language, in my words, or try to say things that might cause other people to experience the experiences that I have experienced or am experiencing in whatever, in whatever context we're talking about in that case. But no, like I think that the way that I experience states is probably not for everyone. It's probably weird just because I'm somewhat of I myself am strange and unusual in many ways. So I don't generally try to like package my form of spirituality for other people. But what does it mean for a koan to be literally true? That's gonna drive somebody crazy thinking about that. It's like this thing where Zen, I mean, I'm in a bastardized Zen always, but it's telling you this like riddle that you're supposed to think about, and it's like impossible to solve. It's literally that. Ooh, you just made it worse. It's literally that. Yeah, so he's being a bastard. Ken Wilber's being a jerk here.
His greatest mythology or interpretive mythology, and somebody I certainly cut my teeth on it. I was a great admirer of his and a really extraordinary work that he did. He used to say that there's really sort of two types of mythology, or mythology forms two different functions. He wouldn't use the terms pre-rational and transrational, but the way we're talking about them is the way he would talk about these two functions of mythology. And the first function is when mythology is taken to be concretely real. But what some people do, particularly educated, intelligent people like us that are trying to get some meaning in our lives, we can tend to take myths as deeply symbolic of something else. So that's a very distinguishing way to tell the difference between pre-rational myths that are are taken to be concretely, literally true, and transrational myths as deeply symbolic. That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth, and it's that sense of I amness. And the problem again with the pre-trans fallacy, way too many people take a lot of the pre-rational stuff and elevate it to trans-rational glory it just doesn't have. Fundamentalist, religious believer, they don't take these things metaphorically. These are not symbols of some higher truth. These are the truth. That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing.
From a really transrational perspective, there's no such thing as a true self. Self is a concept. Self is a narrative. Self is a myth. And these claims that you're...
My question for like chat is like, are pointing out instructions true? Are they sometimes true? Are they always true? Must they be true? And to be literal, pointing out instructions to be literal. Well, literal's a dumb word to use, right? Because they're clearly not literal, right? And I mean, that's the point you're making. That's really easy for me to parse out, like, right? Like the first time I watched, not in this context, but if any time I'd watch that, I'd be like, well, literal's a silly word to use there. And I don't think that's like the whole thesis of his model. I think that that's just like a time where there's this weird thing with pointing out instructions that they really have to kind of be taken seriously by the psyche itself. Like, but you have to actually like check it out, like try it on. I feel like that's kind of how it works for me anyways. I kind of fool myself into a state of consciousness by saying I'm already in it, and then it starts happening, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, I am in it. Whoa, good job. Yeah, sure. I mean, I get what you're saying. Yeah, but so I that's why I'm focusing on it though, because like, are pointing out, like, if a human being says to another human being something and that causes them, not solely, but it results in probably having an influence on that person experiencing a transcendental state of consciousness, you can't, yeah, you can't say to some person watching, the thing I just said is true. That is wrong to somebody else watching. Yeah, like I agree with that. If it's your koan though, it's true, and it's you. In order for it to be effective, I think that you have to have a placebo effect. That's kind of how sorcery works in a lot of cases, is like trying on a different framework. I amness before the Big Bang is literally true and is your true self. That's Ken Wilber's claim. I amness before the Big Bang is literally true. I amness before the Big Bang is literally true. That's a koan right there.
You're making about the true nature of reality don't even rise to the rational.
No, I would agree that before your parents were born, I am. He that is part of the work. That is in his books. That's the thing he says. That's part of the message.
Level of interpretation. They're not even compatible with our understanding of how reality actually works, rooted in a rational perspective. They can't be transrational.
Rooted in a rational perspective, rooted in an integral perspective, or I guess flowering in an integral perspective.
If they don't even rise to the level of the rational. Transrational transcends and includes the rational. So it would be a perspective that is in accord with our rational understandings about how reality works, and
in accord with them, it could be disruptive of them. I mean, this is the point, that our rational understandings of reality, we don't know how rational our understanding of reality is. This is sort of level 6. I mean, this is kind of how I understand transrational in general, in the way that you're putting it, as not related to states, but as a level of development. Like, it's being able to look critically at my own rational apparatus, and I think that from this perspective, anything that anyone thinks is suspicious, right?
Doing more, deconstructing the relative ways in which we talk about and understand.
I think the science of objectivity finds proof in objective quadrants, but ontological science, the ground of being, necessitates an upper left proof. Wilber says one must do the experiment So that's another thing that's a good phrasing of it. It's a thing that Ken Wilber says, Integral says, is like the upper left state experience is like a scientific experiment, and the rules will seem strange to you for how you do the experiment. They will seem strange to you, I should assume, strange to me, until it starts making sense along the path. Kind of. That seems to be how it's gone in lower level cultures that have brought this into a mainstream place in their cultures. And yeah, and science in quotes, that's a upper left science, but upper right is like the science land.
Understand the world and ourselves because of the relative nature of language, because of the fact that we're always doing storytelling. This is the postmodern or trans-rational deconstruction of the rational. That's why it's saying everything is relative, because the whole point is that all we have is relative language to be able to talk about things. All we have is storytelling. All we have is myth. So beyond just the literal rational interpretation where we take stories literally and ask, is it literally true? Is it literally false? We would also include metaphor and ask, do the metaphors also cash out in accord with reality? That's why it's rational plus, not pre-rational myths taken literally, but myths understood metaphorically. Even scientific myths understood as myths. Evolution is a story about how things happen. We're doing storytelling. It's just that all the symbols that we use, all the names that we have for everything are really well qualified, and they line up with facts. So it's a very factual story. Like in the same way that a biopic about a person might be a mythology. It's a story, not the actual thing in itself, but it doesn't mean that the biopic or the myth isn't true, that it's not telling a true story. You see? So the fact that it's all storytelling doesn't mean that all stories are equally true and valid. And it doesn't mean that all stories are purely fiction. For example, when George Lucas made Star Wars, he might have been using these archetypal characters to try and talk about true things that he actually believed about life and the world and how we should live. So from a trans-rational perspective, stories aren't just fiction. You have to understand what's true about it or what's fiction about it. You have to understand what the story is actually saying, and does it cash out in accord with reality? So if we're making a claim that Jesus died on the cross, are we making a claim about a historical figure that needs to be evaluated with his?
Like, I mean, nobody's going to argue about this definition of trans rationality. I mean, this is like a really good explanation of it. The suggestion, of course, like remains like that what occurs in a transcendent state of consciousness can be called trans-rational. I mean, so we're getting into semantics here and, nomenclature of a meta theory. Like, should we not call that trans-rational in spite of it kind of having a feeling of being trans-rational from the perspective of the language and the experience?
Historical facts and evidence? Or are we making a claim, a symbolic metaphorical claim about what it means to die to the ego and live for God or live for the absolute or to live for the greater good and the bigger picture? If that's what we mean by that symbol, if what we're talking about is, I think of Jesus on the cross as a way of talking about living for a higher purpose, that would be a trans-rational understanding of that symbol. But again, it depends on how you cash that out. If what you mean is to live for God and what you mean is spirit, well, are these claims about spirit true? There's not a good reason to believe in something like a spirit. So then maybe that interpretation of the symbol doesn't actually cash out with reality, and it's more of a pre-rational interpretation. Whereas if you're just taking it in this vague poetic way about living for a higher purpose, that can cash out in relationship with reality as we understand it. You see what I'm saying? It's about interpretation and how those interpretations cash out in accord with reality. What is the type of claim that we're actually making? And then are we using the appropriate methodology to evaluate that claim?
From the outside, how do you know if this person's operating at a pre-rational or trans?
Pending. It's just like I can't really say much further about this without digging into non-reductionism's treatment of states. So, I mean, all I'm so far I'm getting that it only occurs in the upper left, but it would have, of course, correlates in other quadrants. But it is a phenomenon that flows from, I guess we should say, the upper left, and the deepest states, transcendental states of consciousness. David says, looking at one's upper left can only show you your upper left, not the truth of ultimate reality. Is your upper left the truth of ultimate reality? It would have to be like all four quadrants to be the truth of ultimate reality, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I need to, I can't really address this without understanding, like, how your, really just your idea of anything to do with states that, like, is different from Ken Wilber and new.
Transrational level. Would it be if they were able to say, I'm going to act as if?
Yeah, well, first of all, you ask them exactly what is it that you're doing. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. If they're making an empirical claim, check it empirically. On the other hand, it can be very high kind of...
So how do you, we've done this. We've done this thing, this moment. Like, how do you empirically check whether there is a ground of being, or whether the general personality of the universe is spirit? These are like
metaphoric and as if interpretive tool.
Rational people tend to only have one type of methodology to be able to evaluate a claim. Is it literally true or literally false? Transrational people can do more. They can say, well, it's literally false, but metaphorically, if by this we mean this, as if this means this, then it could be true. And that's a reasonable claim, a rational claim to make. It transcends and includes the literal.
Like, and me as like a placebo purist, if believing this thing makes it true, is it then true?
Rational. You see?
Transrational has to do with a redefinition of the self-sense, the moral position that you inhabit, the meaning of your life, the way you perceive and understand the nature of reality.
No, transrational is more...
all of those. If you go beyond rational to transrational, does that not change the nature of how you understand your life and your identity and what you are and the nature of reality? Like, I think that each of the levels represents a change in all of those things. Those are different lines, of course, but yeah, they show up at levels.
More about understanding the relative nature of language. Transpersonal is about deconstructing our concept of self and understanding ourself differently in relation to reality, but not in the way that you're thinking of it. You're more thinking of it in terms of the traditional worldview, like that we are only consciousness, that consciousness is what's really real, that consciousness is the ground.
I don't think that this part's true. I think how I'm thinking of it is in a very, like, generalizing, clumpy, aggregating way. And the word rational to me is generally referring to level 5 across the board, not a particular line. That's a problem with vocabulary.
Of being. So the way that you're cashing that out is not actually transrational, it's pre-rational. You're still working in the context of traditional mythological interpretations of what's happening with these states. It's exactly in line with traditional fundamentalist dogmatic Buddhism.
And
the
yeah,
pre-rational.
So I guess the pot of gold is like, do you have content somewhere that gets me to a causal state of consciousness using like reason, logic, science, literal. I don't have access to anything like that. So, and I don't do it the way that a lot of other people do it. So I'm curious about all three of these. I think that's the pot of gold in any case, is like, okay, here, there's no vocabulary from other places. There's no drawing from any other source. This is how you become enlightened, and this is what the word enlightened means. That to me is kind of what Integral has moved toward. I see that this is like the first thing that kind of starts to do that.
rational thing. It's not trans-rational that has deconstructed Buddhism and is now finding the true things about it. No, it's just literal Buddhism.
It can represent a deeper self, a higher self. It can represent oneness with all of reality.
So trans being not metaphorical, but a deeper self, a higher self. So not poetic metaphorical, which is pre-rational mythology.
Mythology isn't pre-rational. As he says in this exact video, people who are literal believers don't think about mythology as mythology. They think about it as literally true, as actual.
You can read mythology at any level. You can comprehend mythology at any level. The mythology that is most, like the strongest mythology that we still use today is going to be the stuff that functions best as mythology. And so we continue to look at it in cases that we describe a lot here. We look at the mythology from higher levels, for sure. I don't think that's very controversial. I have a video about enlightenment through different stages linked in the description. Cool. Yeah, cool. That might be a good next step for me.
Actually real.
Fundamentalist, religious believer, they don't take these things metaphorically. These are not symbols of some higher truth. These are the truth. So that's a very distinguishing way to tell the difference between pre-rational myths that are taken to be concretely, literally true, and trans-rational myths as deeply symbolic.
People who are fundamentalist religious believers believe the myth literally, which is what you're doing, which is what Wilbur is doing.
That's a literal koan. That's not a symbolic thing. There's something in you right now that existed prior to your parents' birth, and it's that sense of I amness.
And I think, based on what I'm showing you, should be undeniable. Rational people deconstruct and
okay. Let's see here. I'm at about 1:33, so there's no way I'm making it to the end of the night. I'm getting a little bit tired. I'm enjoying this so much. I'm not going to conclude. Like, I'm not going to do my whole conclusion because I have to say, we're getting into a really cool place here. This is a little more dense in terms of like my responses. Like this part will be a little more dense, and I'm going to try not to just like repeat things I say or just repeat like that I ought to check out like other stuff to get more of a sense of what you're saying. But just responding to this right now. Thank you, people who tuned in. I'm still doing these by surprise. I'm not going to schedule them for a minute. I've got a lot of things going on, and really awesome that people showed up today. We had a lively chat. David, this guy in the video, he's here talking to me. That's in the chat. What I don't know if that's clear to everyone. I don't know how many people are like boomers like me and they're like looking, but yeah, so I'm responding both to his video and to him hanging out in the chat here in real time. So very fun, awesome video. Thanks everybody for being here. Next time it looks like if I don't go to jail or anything, it looks like we're gonna dive into this whole all of my state work so far has taken place through a lower level lens than the lens that I typically am, than my general center of gravity, center of altitude. The only way that I know to access states seems to, at this point in the discussion, seems to be coming from exclusively pre-level 5. And I'm saying I definitely see the case for none of my spirituality really comes much from level 5. I think level 5 is my secular zone very heavily, and I do feel a hallowed sense of, I love spiders. I like nature's cute, nature's beautiful. I love it. It's the spiritual jam. Creating nature, creating the experience of being people. This is all a very spiritual thing, but I don't like that's not really where I would go to have a state experience in this moment. So yeah, I'm probably really weak on it feels like, again, to me, it feels like level 5 is generally pretty weak on state technologies and practices that genuinely take you to those higher states. I do think that there's differences across the altitudes in terms of how much they have seemed historically to prioritize state practice or to make it a part of life for some class of people, a part of life that is available to people, a part of life that is cherished and celebrated and elevated up as a good thing, as a value in that society. I think those are like pretty across the board, but you could draw some generalizations and inferences there. I would agree that, like, in my opinion, I do states through a level 6, level 7 kind of lens. I would say in general, that's kind of how I've done states. It would seem, and that seemed to be where my center of gravity was at the time. And I am of the mind this is where it'll go. This is where we're going with this. I'm of the mind that ancient mythologies, ancient texts, things that came from a period where the center of gravity of civilization itself was much lower, perhaps level 4, level 3, that those have actually been gateways for me to understanding these things much better than through my own culture, through my own levels literature, except for Ken Wilber, which I consider level 7, level 8 literature that has helped me to access states greatly. Perhaps one of the most helpful things in terms of reading people, in terms of ideology and becoming steeped in different technologies and different ways of comprehending what this perennial philosophy is. Okay, and we'll get into it. Namaste to you all. Thank you so much for being here. This is so much fun. I hope I can keep doing this a lot. I feel like I'm getting a little better at not crashing my stream. I don't think it crashed a single time. So now I don't know how to just like leave ordinarily. But thanks everybody for being here. Keep coming down. If it ends up being hot and fun and it keeps happening, I will make it a kind of somewhat regular thing. Obviously not just talking to David, but going on stream and maybe doing some of my kind of like unpacking ideas and some of my kind of like teaching ideas sort of business here. Give us a woo, and I guess we're all going to bed.